Hey guys, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. This is episode 22 of the 2025 season, and in this episode we're going to be previewing the Canadian Grand Prix. We've had a 2-week break from F1, but it's back on our screens as we head to the circuit of Gilles Villeneuve to see cars race around the streets of Montreal. I'm your host for this one, Anwar, and in this episode I'm joined by Lucy and Daniel, who are obviously returning guests, and Thomas as well. So thank you guys all coming onto the show. The first question I kind of want to ask is, are we excited for Montreal? Is this something where we expect this to be one of the better races across the season? I'll start with Thomas here.
I'm not really sure. I mean, I think I've been kind of an F1 fan since, well, forever, I guess, since I was 4 years old, maybe. I think that's the closest memory that I have, the earliest memory I have of Formula One. And I always remember kind of Montreal being kind of one of those races where it was probably one of the better races, but I think, as time has gone on, it's kind of waned a little bit. The cars have gotten wider and faster, and so it's more of a tighter circuit, so there's not really much going on. But I think last year was pretty crazy, so I think, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we've just come off the back of a very exciting Spanish Grand Prix. Daniel, do you think that this is the type of race that can carry that exciting momentum, I guess?
Sure, we've seen some exciting races from Canada in the past. 2007, 2011, with the longest race in F1 history, of course. Last year was pretty crazy, so it definitely has the potential to throw some extraneous variables such as weather into the mix. Safety cars as well kind of breed a bit more chaos, which is actually what we saw in Spain last time out as well. So it's definitely the kind of track that can kind of breed that kind of race. 3 DRS zones as well, so we're in for some good overtaking opportunities. And all in all, a good weekend of action, hopefully. I'd say qualifying as well seems to be, I wouldn't say it's where the cars most come alive because there's a lot of slow speed corners. It's not really, you could say it's quite finicky, to be honest. But last year we had a dead heat for pole position between Russell and Verstappen. So something like that, preferably just as close this year, maybe between the McLaren drivers or who knows, would be quite exciting, I think. Looking forward to it.
Lucy, I'm going to ask you about the weather because we've seen there's a small percentage chance of rain on, I believe, the Sunday. How much can that really affect things around this track in particular?
I mean, weather always plays a big factor at Montreal because it's it can, when it gets rainy, it also gets very cold. So especially if I remember, it's for cars on inters, like especially behind safety car, things like that. While most of the time tyre wear issues is to do with the tyres overheating, if it rains at Montreal, it will most likely be that the tyres get way too cold and that they will have trouble heating up, which could be interesting because then it sort of reverses the usual balance of power in terms of tyre wear, and you can see teams then who maybe usually have worse tyre wear performing a little better because they can get their colder tyres up to temperature in a rainy track. Yeah, the chance of rain this year is minimal. It's about 25%, but if it does happen, especially if it's, a drying race track or one where it starts off dry and then rain comes midway through, like most races, it will make it interesting. Canada's got a good, I just love the Canada circuit, and I love wet races around Canada. It's just a bit of fun, really.
Thomas, we've seen quite a few wacky races in the wet, so I guess, do you agree with that sentiment? It would be nice to have another wet one here, particularly in Canada.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the wet always kind of creates a lot of chaos. So, it always shakes things up. So, I mean, look at last year. I mean, I think it was Haas. They just went for a gamble. It paid off for a few laps. So, who knows? Might happen again.
100% on the tire wear related note. In terms of the tire selection they're bringing the softest in the range, so C4, C5, C6. So but even though it is a admittedly really low wear track, so we've seen multiple teams like you mentioned the House taking a gamble last year. I recall seeing quite a few times some driver, I think Alex Albon did it a few years ago, just going really, really long on one set of tires and making it work. So there is definitely a degree of people willing to stick their tires out for the long haul and making it work. So it should bring a nice variety of strategy for sure. In terms of just a few updates before we get into the real discussions about who we expect to be at the sharp end. Lance Stroll is competing this weekend. He's given the all clear after he missed the Spanish Grand Prix due to a wrist injury. We saw quite a few rumours and murmurings about him lashing out at his team, but I think they've all kind of been debunked. But I'll start with Daniel here. Do you think that Lance Stroll missing a race due to an injury can affect kind of momentum for him? Because Aston Martin suddenly, over the last few races, have looked like they've had a bit more of a competitive car.
Just firstly, I like how you mentioned that we're going to talk about the sharp end, and then you started talking about Lance Stroll. I know Aston Martin scored points last weekend, but that's very optimistic of you, Anwar.
It's relative, isn't it? It's the sharp end for Aston Martin.
Yes, yeah, that would be a sharp end just in the points. Is it disrupting Lance Stroll's momentum? Probably a little bit. It's going to be when you miss a track like Spain, which is just good for getting laps in the car, representative laps of most tracks and corner types, and just getting a feel for how the car behaves in each of those. So obviously he's missed out on that. And if there is any recurring, recovery time or pain in his wrist from that weekend, then that's going to be tough, especially not exactly especially in a track like Canada, because it doesn't reward the most aggressive driving style. Let's say you're not exactly throwing the car into every corner and wrestling with the wheel so much, so it shouldn't be too high impact on the wrists areas and the hands in particular. But obviously, just from a competitiveness point of view, this might just be a rebuilding weekend for Lance Stroll. Just kind of, forgive the pun, but get to grips with his new situation with his wrists and hands. But no, he's been on decent form this year, so I expect that he'll probably hit the ground, not running, but at a brisk stroll, shall we say?
That's two puns in the same kind of set of sentences, I guess. That's good. Let's actually look to the front end of the grid now, rather than relative front end of the grid. We've had the two McLarens kind of running away in terms of pace compared to the rest of the teams behind. Do we expect that type of trend to continue? And do we expect one driver here, based on historical factors here, Lucy, to have an upper hand this weekend?
No, I think that there's nothing about Canada which would inherently favour teams catching up to McLaren more. It's not a sort of circuit where I can see... You could see maybe a shock performance, more like kind of say we had at Suzuka, where I don't think anyone really saw Verstappen out qualifying the McLarens coming, even though it did happen. But there's not anything which I think means that McLaren will be on the back foot coming into this weekend. And I also can't think of a particular reason why any one driver might be like within McLaren might be more optimistic going into this weekend than others. Norris had a good race last year comparatively. He could have been on for a win were it not for some safety car timings. I think I'm remembering that correctly. And he's also carrying the momentum of outscoring Piastri in the triple header, or performing better generally. But then counting for the fact that Piastri won the Spanish Grand Prix in pretty dominant fashion, and I'd say that especially with only 10 points in the championship, they're on pretty even footing. And then as for the rest of the grid, I'm expecting it to kind of be business as usual in terms of who can be challenging the McLarens, I'm wondering whether Mercedes will want to rebound, because they had a terrible triple header. Like, by their own merit, they did not have a great time, and so they'll be wanting to rebound from that. And Red Bull as well will be wanting a better time, just to be more challenging to McLaren. But I can't see any shocks up the front of the grid. Long story short.
Thomas, do you kind of agree with that same sentiment of it should be all to play for between the two championship contenders?
I think McLaren are going to be the stronger team. I think it's going to be Piastri for the win. I don't see Lando. I mean, I think I've been very impressed by Piastri this season. I think he's just he's taken on board what happened in last season, and of course, and I think he's dare I say, taking the leadership role from Norris. If you ask me, I think Norris has just been a bit quiet in these past couple of races. So I think if he's really wanting to win this championship, he needs to make a statement win and go, no, Piastri's not going to run away with this. He's not going to take this team, on his own. I'm going to put up a challenge here. But I'm not really seeing that with Lando at the moment.
I mean, he did win Monaco. Like, that is, Monaco is definitely a circuit where, because he ended on, because he landed it on pole, it was therefore the win was much more likely. It's still considering that it had been a while since his last win before then, and Piastri had been sort of outperforming him just in terms of race wins and results. I'd say that he'll want another win on top of that. It's not a case of he needs in some way to sort of take the team back from Piastri. McLaren seem to sometimes, I think, to their detriment, effectively just permanently focus on just not having a number one driver, sometimes at the expense of having a cohesive strategy. But I don't think there's a risk of Piastri somehow taking Norris's number one spot, because Norris is still competitive, even if Piastri's leading the championship and has maybe been slightly more compelling in some races.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think for me personally, I think Piastri just has a bit more consistency in the long run. I think he's just he always just delivers, whether it's being quiet or winning races. It's just, he's always seems to be there. And I think I trust him more than Norris, where Norris is just, of course he has that start line issue. And, if you look at Monaco, again, he did lock up into turn one. It's I just think Piastri, I trust him more to lead McLaren more so than Norris at the moment.
We'll get more into this discussion of who we believe will be the winner of that inter-team battle once we get to our predictions. But I'm going to ask Daniel this question about who do we expect to be the closest competitors? Because some weekends, I think most weekends we've seen Verstappen always be nipping at the heels of McLaren. We saw that in Spain, it was Verstappen who was honestly putting a little bit of pressure through the strategy. Do we think that Red Bull, and in his hands at least, because we don't really have any degree of confidence in Yuki Tsunoda providing similar types of results, do we think that he once again will be the biggest threat to McLaren domination here?
I think it makes sense to assume that Max will be the closest challenger. Mercedes, I reckon this is a track that they could get close, but the car is just so fickle in the setup and its window of performance. Sometimes in winter, temperatures in Canada can sink to something like minus 30 degrees, which is the perfect working window for the Mercedes tyres in terms of temperature. But we're not going to see that this weekend. So maybe they will not be as competitive as they would be, for example, on a wet weekend. If we were to have one of those, I think George Russell would be able to challenge, probably. Verstappen, I don't know, that Red Bull car, it doesn't seem to perform well on traction out of slow corners. And this track rewards traction because there are quite a few slow corners. So you need it to kind of stay ahead of your competitors or catch someone else using it out of the DRS zones and kind of take them into the next corner. So I'm not sure from that point of view that the car's going to be very strong. But then, like I said, who's really there to capitalize if that Red Bull isn't? We've already talked about Ferrari and the mystery that is that car. You know, Fred Vasseur may be under a bit of pressure for that kind of role. Whether you think that's right or not, I don't know. But, you know, it's certainly not going to be the days of the 1970 Canadian Grand Prix, which was a Ferrari 1-2, the good old days. But maybe we can see something unexpected, which just seems to be Ferrari's specialty these days, just pulling something out of their mechanic's helmet or something. I don't know. I'm trying to say a hat, but like a magician, just kind of magicking. Just magicking something out of their helmet.
I guess the kind of saving grace for that Mercedes point that you were mentioning is the fact that I, for whatever reason, remember the Russell pole to be quite a big surprise. And it was the first race where if things went their way, they probably could have had a good chance of winning it last year. So I guess that gives me a little bit of hope in terms of them being competitive around here, even though we haven't really had the level of consistency we would like, honestly, across the ground effect era, really, from the Mercedes car. You mentioned the Ferrari, and I want to pivot there now. And I'm going to ask Thomas here, because we've heard rumours about Fred Vasseur's position being questioned, being under threat. Is it important for Ferrari here to have a good performance this weekend to kind of silence those? Or do we think that this ultimately is unlikely or to occur, given the fact that we're 1 year away from a new set of engine regulations? Honestly, just aero regulations as well.
I think it's based on what the Ferrari higher-ups want. And I think if they've already made their mind up about Fred, it's very hard to get that kind of mindset out of their brains. And I think this is the thing with Ferrari as well. I mean, it's been well over 15 years since their last Drivers' Championship and their Constructors' Championship. We've had multiple changes. You know, you can change the head of the team. It hasn't worked. And of course they're thinking about bringing along the head of the Le Mans program, but again, it's inbuilt in Ferrari, and I would even go as far to say that, like, even beyond the Schumacher years as well. I mean, you could argue that wasn't even Ferrari; that was Benetton. A lot of the staff from Benetton moved over to Ferrari with Schumacher. So, this is the thing, is I think Ferrari are too stubborn. They're far too kind of prideful to think we're going to do it a different way. And I think that this is the problem with Ferrari, is they're too prideful to ever kind of take on board any kind of differing ideas. And I think changing the top, the head of the team is not going to do anything. It's a structural issue. It's deep. It's deeply embedded within the team. And I think, if Fred goes and is replaced by, whoever comes in, it's going to be the same issue. We've seen this time and time again. It's not going to change anything.
Yeah, do we have any, I guess, moving away from the Ferrari politics side of things, because you've given a really good summation of that in terms of what we've heard and honestly, and what we kind of expect the result of this to be and what our feelings are about that. Daniel, do we think that Ferrari, the fact that we don't really ever consider, I know Ferrari got a podium last weekend, but they kind of inherited that, right? Is the point of this kind of firing situation, I guess, do you think the fact that we don't even consider Ferrari as being a threat to the McLarens a reason why they are making this change, or potentially considering at least making the change?
I mean, sure, it's all about the results on track, right? If they're nowhere near the front runners, then there's pressure. There's always going to be pressure. It's just part of the job, especially as a Ferrari team principal, which I'd argue is the most pressured non-driver job in Formula One, being the head of the Ferrari team. It's basically the weight of a nation on your shoulders. But having said that, I don't think Vasseur is the right person to scapegoat for this. If it is a scapegoat, I'm not entirely sure about that. Let's not forget, last year they were 14 points away, or 15 if they were going to win it, 15 points away from claiming their first Constructors' Championship since 2008, I believe. So, and that was purely under Vasseur's leadership, right? He took over at the start of 23. He had a year to build in. 24 was entirely his influence. It was the changes that he put into effect that were showing and providing the benefits on track. So to then, less than a year later, sack him is a little fickle, I'd say. I think it's a bit knee-jerk, kind of like the reactions of many Formula One fans. I'm sure a lot of Tifosi right now are thinking, Vasseur, he's driven our team into the ground. We're third in the Constructors. We're not going to challenge this year. It's a lost cause. But I think we just need to give it a bit more time. I think obviously it was the wrong decision to switch the car philosophy this year, but it's not over. They could still easily pick up a win or two this year.
I think another question is, Fred was someone who was involved with Hamilton before he got into Formula One. I think his outing could really kind of put into question how, the future of Hamilton in the sport, I guess. Because if Fred goes, does Hamilton stay on board? Or does he just go, that's it, I'm done?
I think the question with that is how much did Hamilton go to Ferrari because he was unhappy with the way that Mercedes were going and wanted something different, and because he'd worked with Vasseur before, he had faith in him as a team principal, and therefore the team that he was behind, leading, and how much of it was him going to Ferrari because, we've seen Vettel do it, if world champions want to win a championship with Ferrari, drivers want to win a championship with Ferrari, they may not be very good at being title contenders most of the time, but they are still a very historic team, and drivers want to say that they're a Ferrari driver, and even more that they're a Ferrari world champion. And so whether Hamilton retires on the basis of Vasseur leaving would be much more about whether he kind of has faith in Ferrari or whether he feels that his career has just kind of naturally reached its end, as opposed to something. Vasseur is by no means the only factor tying Hamilton to Ferrari. There's also just the Ferrari-ness of it all. I don't think Ferrari's an adjective, but it is one now. Okay.
I think as well that I think with Hamilton, he's kind of talked about himself, this kind of belief that maybe he's not as good as he used to be. And this may be a controversial view, but I actually think that Hamilton has been declining since, maybe 2021. I think I vividly remember you look at kind of that season, which I quite frankly don't really like looking back on because of everything, behind the scenes and everything that went on with it. I vehemently disagree with people who think it's one of the best seasons of all time. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. And it's not just the Abu Dhabi Britain situation or anything like that. It's just, yeah. But I think there's, I think looking back at the Mercedes dominance, there were a few times like Hockenheim 2019, for example, where it just felt like they were so far ahead of everyone else that like when they actually needed to kind of really, really step up, it was like they were too complacent, and of course the pit stop and everything, where it's just, I think kind of with Hamilton is that, because he's had so many great cars with Mercedes and everything, that maybe just kind of got used to those cars, and then when he has a car which is not as good as those cars, he can't really work with it because he's been so used to those really good cars that it's kind of like Alonso, where I think he's just been given so many terrible cars that he's just kind of been. I think there are some drivers that just always drive terrible cars, and they've just become naturally used to them. While some other drivers who kind of have great cars, then they have a bad car, then it's suddenly I think as well with Hamilton is he's never really kind of done well under kind of when he's good, he is amazing. But I think when it comes to difficulties, it's very hard for him to actually kind of get his head down. And I think the past couple of races where he's been kind of on the radio, kind of arguing with kind of the with his pit crew, I guess, with strategies and everything, it just seems like he's come into Ferrari and gone, okay, I understand where Vettel was. I understand now what Vettel was dealing with. I think really it feels like Hamilton just it was a move where he just went. I drove for Ferrari. That's it. Obviously the 8th World Championship was there, and obviously he wants to. But I think it's now starting to kind of come into his mind that maybe it's not a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of hoping and praying at this stage, that Ferrari come back to where they should be and Hamilton comes back to where he should be as well, because without a shadow of a doubt, he's underperformed this season. He did get that sprint win for sure. But
by the way,
obviously earlier in the season, but I don't think he's been particularly convincing in some of the demeanour that we've mentioned a lot on this show about the way he.
Anwar, just to clarify.
Yes, go.
I'm not sure we mentioned it in the Spain review, but Lewis Hamilton did have some damage on his car, which was partly responsible for being overtaken by the Sauber. So maybe it's not as bad as, he's finished. It's, he's not that far behind, but, it's certainly not what we.
Yeah, I think Leclerc is well embedded in that team as well. So it's, of course, it's naturally going to be a advantage for Leclerc, but kind of. Well, yeah, he is in that team. He's been in that team for a long time. It's kind of his team. And of course, with Hamilton, he's kind of got to deal with that. But, I think even myself, who did kind of expect Leclerc to kind of, be ahead of Hamilton a little bit, it's still kind of surprising to see him struggle this much. I think it's just naturally because of the cars as well. The ground effect here is just not suited to Hamilton's style. And I think he's always had that problem with this kind of era of cars. And I just think, people still hoping that, he'll win an 8th World Championship. I just don't think it's going to work. I mean, if he's going to win an 8th World Championship, he has to go against, Verstappen, who is, in his prime. And Hamilton, you could say, well, he's in his 40s now. He had his chance in 2021, and I think it's just past now.
Yeah, I think there were probably 3 factors that kind of allured Lewis Hamilton towards Ferrari. It was the prestige of the brand and driving in the red car, in the red overalls. That's the first. There was the leadership, which was John Elkann and the team principal, Fred Vasseur, who obviously he knows prior to going to the team, and the promise of competitiveness. So if you reflect
I think
on
it was
those...
also as well... just the branding as well. I think he kind of left Mercedes because they weren't giving him kind of an ambassador role or something like that. So I think it was the off track as well, where kind of, of course, Hamilton is reaching the end of his career. He has other interests as well outside of Formula One. He's interested in, that kind of stuff. I think that was very attractive to him. To go to Ferrari because of they were going to give him that amount of kind of, the stuff he wanted to do.
Okay, yeah. Well, if you think about that, he's still got the ambassadorship. There's still the Ferrari allure. The leadership of Jamal Khan would still be there regardless of whether Fred Vasseur was or not. But the competitiveness, which is probably the most important thing, is not there at the moment. Will it be there next year? We don't know yet. We'll have to wait to find out. So I don't think he's going to call it quits this year, but he'll probably reevaluate the options going into the future.
How about Cadillac as well? Because, I mean, that's something up in the air. I think as well, Stroll, I mean, from what I've heard, the injury he sustained was actually quite bad. And I think, I guess there's a question. I mean, there was, of course, that talk that he was kind of out of the, like previously, before he kind of skipped the race. There was talk about him having a big spat with his team. So
my understanding that was all debunked, though. That wasn't that was something that was a pure rumor and didn't end up materializing.
I also think it's interesting on the Stroll thing is that I'm wondering whether, because it seemed like, at least from Aston Martin's press releases, like his injury had been sort of slightly kind of resurfacing for a few weeks. I'm assuming maybe then just the whole triple header is kind of how I interpreted that, but maybe even a little bit before then. And so he was maybe kind of trying to hope that it would sort itself out in this fortnight, like between Spain and Canada. I'm wondering whether he wants to come back specifically because it's his home race, out, like whether he's feeling he's more like
I think
more inclined to
push
himself to come back because it's his kind of it's his home race. Out of all, no driver wants to miss any races because of injury, but especially not your home race.
Yeah, I mean that may kind of. I mean, I think where I'm going with this is, obviously Newey's on in the team now. There's of course this talk about Verstappen or someone else going into Aston Martin. I mean, there's of course the question about how long does Alonso stay on for. Are they possibly thinking about moving Stroll over to the hypercar program? Because I think
I do think a lot of this is very speculative in terms of what we expect. So I think that we have to kind of wait and see with this type of thing, because I don't necessarily think this is the type, all of these discussions will kind of come to a head here in Canada. I don't think so. I want to kind of put a kind of a pin in that, just on the basis of I think this type of discussion is going to be a little bit more of a longer drawn out type of rumor mill, I guess. And I think we've only just started that rumor mill as well. So I think it's good that we've got all of these kind of ideas of what could potentially happen, but I don't think that we're going to get any confirmation on anything over the next 3 days. I don't know if people agree with me on that kind of basis.
Yeah,
100%. So with that in mind, I kind of wanted to pivot the discussion back towards Canada specifically a little bit more. And just quickly, just before we go into predictions, talk about the kick Saubers. I know this is it feels very random and it feels bizarre that I'm even talking about kick Sauber because I dislike talking about them. But they finished fifth last weekend in the capable hands of Nico Hülkenberg. Do you think, Daniel, that we can expect another points playing finishing position for one of the green Xbox cars?
Yeah, I forgot to mention them when I was listing the possible challengers to McLaren, didn't I? Yeah, I should have done that.
I mean, I think they're the closest challenger. They've shown brilliant pace, you know what I mean?
I hope your predictions reflect that, Anwar.
Absolutely.
Good. Yes, good. Sauber, in their typical Xbox, Shrek-coloured livery that they have, they're doing well. I think, to be honest, Hülkenberg is riding a wave. Bortoletto is kind of at the bottom of the wave. He's not at the crest, but he's not in the sort of undercurrent either. He's maybe beginning the wave. I think he's gone under the radar this season. He hasn't got any points yet, but I reckon that's going to change pretty quickly, especially with those upgrades that Sauber bought that catapulted them up in terms of pace, to be honest. I'm not sure anyone was expecting that kind of turn in form that they had with Hulkenberg to get to P5. We certainly weren't with our top 5 predictions. I don't think a Sauber was anywhere in sight. But I'm liking it. I'm not a Sauber hater like some members of the podcast. I think they are a plucky little team who are based in Switzerland randomly, not in Motorsport Valley like everyone else in Formula One. And I just think it's great that we've got some variety in the top 10. Even if it does mean that Alpine are last in the constructors, I maybe have more of a soft spot for Alpine. But I just think, we haven't really seen where or what corner type, for example, the Sauber is competitive. Obviously, they were fast in Spain, which is kind of representative. We know that. So maybe that also correlates to good progress in Canada. But we're not sure. So that's a great unknown. And it's what we love about Formula One, because I just don't know where they're going to be.
I think Hulkenberg did say that the result in Spain was pretty lucky. I think that the timing of the safety car and everything I think Hulkenberg did admit that it was very, very lucky that they were in that position. So I think I wouldn't say that Sauber are necessarily kind of in that area. I think we're going to see Sauber maybe at the bottom of the grid again this race. But I think it's positive. It's nice to see them maybe moving up a bit on the grid. But I think, I wouldn't say that Sauber is necessarily back, so to speak.
I wouldn't. With the whole lucky thing, maybe it was lucky that Max Verstappen got the penalty and they inherited the 5th place. But they were genuinely fast. I mean, they did a good job on the strategy as well to put themselves into that position. Obviously, all those soft tyres definitely helped at the safety car restart, for example. But the ailing Lewis Hamilton and the Ferrari had damage anyway. So I just think maybe those small aspects were lucky. But on the whole, I don't think they're going to be back markers this weekend. But
I thought it was maybe lucky that Sauber ended up in 5th, but I didn't think it was lucky that they got points. While I was surprised to see a Sauber in the points, there wasn't any point where I was thinking, it's inevitable that they're going to fall back to 15th, 16th, which is where kind of they've been for some of this season. So,
yeah, I think we wait and see in terms of whether they can replicate the form that they kind of showed over in Spain here. I'm with Daniel here. I do think there is a good. I think they genuinely do have pace. I was kind of joking about them being the closest challengers, obviously. But I think they will be up there in and around the point scoring positions with both cars. In terms of moving to our predictions now, so seeing how we kind of test our F1 knowledge, I guess, and how much we know. We will see how accurate our predictions are for this weekend. So once again, we're going to be running the same format as usual now for this year, which is a prediction looking at the pole position, the top 5 in the race, a random prediction, and a DNF. So we've got those are the things that we're going to be predicting. Who wants to kind of reveal their predictions first? I'll leave it up to the rest of you to decide who wants to go first.
I think Piastri will win. I think Norris will finish 2nd. Verstappen, I think 3rd. And then I think it might be Russell and then Leclerc.
Cool. So you said can I firstly ask who have you said is on pole?
I think Piastri.
Cool. So you're expecting Piastri to take a conversion from pole to the win.
Yep.
Cool. So 1, 2, 3, 5. So Piastri in the lead. Then you follow with Norris. You put Verstappen 3rd.
Yep.
And then Leclerc 4th, Russell 5th.
Yeah.
Awesome. Who wants to go next? Lucy, do you want to? I can't wait to hear yours because I guarantee.
Yeah, I've never let realistic performance expectations get in the way of my predictions.
Yep.
We've been talking about how they could maybe be better here with some slightly less terrible tyre wear, and I'm predicting maybe less close, although it would be fun if it was as close. Same pole position as last year. I'm saying Russell's going to be on pole position. Could not tell you why, but the voice in my head told me that, so I said it.
That is an interest. So Russell, who's giving you that confidence in them? I mean,
nothing in particular. I mean, I like we've kind of said, I remember last year up until Canada, yes, Mercedes had been kind of in and around up, like they were definitely one of the top teams. They were by no means sort of languishing at the back of the field. But yeah, we said that the pole position for Russell last year in Canada was a bit of a shock. And I think that we could see that scenario happening again, especially, Mercedes have typically been a little better in quali than in the race sometimes, and then sometimes it's been the other way around. But I don't know, I can just see it maybe happening. But I also wouldn't be surprised if I get this one completely wrong and he ends up like P13, so don't quote me on this.
Yeah, I mean, we never quoted you when you were putting Williams in 4th and 3rd and 5th.
Right,
times, so.
you jest, but wait till I get to my podium finishes.
Oh no, don't do this.
Like I said, I've never let realistic results get in the way of my predictions. I'm saying Piastri is going to finish P1. Even though I've not said that he'll be on pole, I'm predicting that he will qualify well. And I think the Mercs will drop back a bit in the race just because McLaren are a good car. And so I can see Piastri winning. I can also see Norris coming second. I don't know. I'd love to say that we're going to finally get the McLaren battle for the win on our hands, which we've wanted, but I don't actually know if that's going to happen. Fortunately, I don't have to predict that. But I'm saying McLaren 1-2. How interesting that 1-2 is remains to be seen. And then P3, we can call it delusion, but if I keep predicting, one day it's going to happen. One day it's going to happen. Alex Albon will get a podium.
Right. Daniel, you've been on this podcast as much as I have. How tired are you of hearing this nonsense?
Well, I wouldn't call it nonsense, Anwar. Just wait till my predictions. We'll see what...
Yeah!
You might be alone in not predicting a Williams good result here. We'll see.
I'm vindicated.
Thomas, do you see what I've got to deal with on this podcast?
Yes.
I've got to do every week with this, it's always Williams top 3. As if they're ever going to do it.
Eventually it will happen. I will be in my 80s and I will still be saying Williams are going to get podium.
I think I'm not sure. Maybe. I don't know. I think they're getting there. I mean, I think they've been slowly building up. I think Williams are kind of doing what I think Ferrari should be doing, which is slowly building up and kind of going, okay, we're starting from, the very bottom. We're going to start from scratch and we're going to move up a little bit. So I think they will get there eventually. Maybe next season, but I wouldn't say this season.
Good to have a little bit of realism on this pod. We have got to keep some degree of respect. Lucy, here's your 4th and 5th in your
4th, I'm saying Russell. I'm saying, the Mercs will drop back a bit, but I think he's still on for a P4. And by predicting him P4, I'm also saying he could maybe get a podium in theory. It fits with me saying he's on pole. He's not going to, I don't know, crash in the first corner or something after starting on pole.
It's a safe bet, isn't it?
And then I said Verstappen P5. I'm predicting a little bit of an anonymous race for Red Bull this weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if Tsunoda doesn't do that well, but Verstappen being Verstappen, he seemingly never lets the actual quality of the car that he's driving get in the way of showing up in the top 5. So I'm saying that's going to happen.
Cool. Daniel, why don't you reveal your pole and top 5?
Okay, so either Lucy has been monitoring my thoughts or my predictions, or this is a freaky coincidence, because I have also gone for a George Russell pole position, as unlikely as it may seem, for similar reasons, in that, who knows really, maybe there's an aspect of compensation for the McLaren 1-2 that I've also predicted. So kind of a bit of craziness in with the mundane point scoring techniques. Piastri first, Norris second. I think Norris just needs a bit more time to dig into the data, really see what's going wrong in his driving style and how to adapt to the car, how to get that feeling back in the steering wheel that he likes so much. In P3, I've gone for Max Verstappen because, well, he'll find a way to get onto the podium, won't he? He'll try and have as clean a race as possible, just kind of pick up the 15 points and walk away without a race ban for Austria, where I expect he should be slightly more competitive, I'd hope, at the Red Bull Ring, given its namesake. In fourth position, Alex Albon. Now, to be honest...
Oh, my God.
No, hear me out. I actually think that triple header was not at all representative of Williams' pace. I mean, you had Monaco when they were just stuck behind the racing bulls forever and then did the tactic themselves to finish in the low points. Spain, where, yeah, sure, that wasn't a good track, but I don't think that the medium speed corners that they struggled in Barcelona are so present in Canada, for example. So I reckon it's kind of equally likely that he'll finish maybe fifth or on the podium. So I put him in the middle in fourth to kind of cover all bases, maybe get a point that way somehow. And then I reckon Russell will just slip down from pole to fifth position. As best as Mercedes can do on a 24-degree race day, I think.
Fair enough. Oh, just to clear, which way did you have the McLarens in the 1-2?
So that was Piastri first and Norris P2.
Cool. Let me go through my pole and top five because I was genuinely considering Russell. I think there's good reason to think that this is a distinct possibility. And I'm not outruling that as a thing overall. I'm not predicting it to happen though. So I'm expecting Lando Norris to come back to form. I don't know if that's more of a hope or more rather than an expectation, but we'll wait to see. But I think we've seen some really close qualifying gaps. Ultimately, I do think it will ebb and flow. And I think this is one where it will ebb in the favour of Lando Norris, at least in qualifying. In the race, I have gone for a Oscar Piastri win, though. I do think that Norris will come second. I think it's very hard to bet against a McLaren 1-2, as demonstrated by all of our predictions. It's just they've got the pace compared to everyone else across all circuits, across every type of track characteristic you have. So we'll see. I think that I also do think the Mercedes will perform well with both cars. So I've gone Russell P3, I've gone Verstappen P4 and Antonelli P5. So no Ferraris, no Williams. I was for a split second thinking of doing a kick Sauber just to throw it in as a little bit of a curveball, but I couldn't commit to that. So I've gone for Piastri, Norris, Russell, Verstappen, and Antonelli in that order. Cool. Thomas, why don't you tell us who you expect to DNF this race and what your random prediction is?
I'm not sure. I think we might have a race where no one DNFs. I think maybe if anyone is going to, I would say maybe Tsunoda. And I think my Brandon.
Is there a reason behind that? Do you think he's just going to bin it, or do you think this is?
Yeah, I think he's just kind of struggling in that car as everyone else is doing. I think the Red Bull as a whole, it kind of reminds me of the Marc Marquez kind of at Honda situation where he was the only one who was able to drive the thing. It was totally focused towards his driving style. Everyone else couldn't drive it until eventually, I mean, until eventually Mark himself couldn't drive and it would kind of try and kill him. And going a bit further back, also as well, Casey Stoner at Ducati as well. So I think we're seeing Max starting to have that situation where even he can't take the car up to where it needs to be, or at least kind of winning races as much as he used to. I think Tsunoda might bin it. My random prediction, I don't know, maybe Verstappen could get a race ban. I don't know. I think there might be.
That's random enough for me. I like it.
I think it's looming over him. It's going to be a focus. It's like, is this going to happen? I mean, obviously we're hearing about. I think I forgot his name now.
Lindblad, I believe.
Yes. Lindblad, doing a test. He's getting his super license early. They are preparing for it. I don't know. It just feels like the pressure is on him. And if we look back on the previous race, Verstappen is kind of under a bit of pressure now. I don't know. It might happen. Like he may be on the podium, but he may just get one extra penalty point, and that'll be it.
Cool. So you've got those there. Lucy, why don't you go through your DNF and random prediction now?
My DNF, I've gone with Lance Stroll solely on the basis of the fact that seemingly apart from Fernando Alonso and Charles Leclerc, actually, people have just had terrible home races this year. Piastri had, compared to the rest of his season, a terrible home race. Tsunoda had a not that great home race. Doohan also had a terrible home race. I forgot that he was there when we were in Australia for a second. Antonelli had a really bad home race at Imola. I'm just thinking maybe home races are cursed. So maybe Lance Stroll's going to DNF is my prediction. And then my random prediction, we're getting historical for this one. We're going back to 1999. I don't like that year. It's very difficult to say. And I'm saying I'd love to say that all three current WDCs on the grid crash into the Wall of Champions, but I'm going to limit myself. At least one former world champion crashes into the Wall of Champions. It's been too long.
That's a good one. Again, we're really pushing the boundaries of what random predictions can be. Now we're looking at crashes in specific areas of the track. So crash Wall of Champions. Interesting. Daniel, what about you? Have you got any spicy DNF or random predictions?
Well, I like Lucy's because what if Lance Stroll crashes at the Wall of Champions and DNFs? And then you know what that means for the future. Maybe next year, right? Aston Martin, a bit of Newey, bit of Honda.
World champion. You heard it here first, guys.
I'm just putting it out there. It's very possible. It could happen. Okay, my DNF, people have been reading my mind again. Thomas, this time, I went for Tsunoda as well. It's his 100th Grand Prix, which will be a bit of a shame for him to DNF there. But Thomas is right in that the car is, so difficult to drive, obviously. Tsunoda, he was picking up small numbers of points. He picked up a 2 points, 4 points, 1 point, but then Spain and Monaco were really the kind of double jab of doom for Tsunoda. It was a really tough couple of weekends, especially post-Spain. He looked defeated, so I'm sadly predicting that his difficulties are going to compound themselves this weekend. And the random prediction, I was going to do one about doing donuts in the car or something, because Canada is actually the number one consumer of donuts in the world, with over 1 billion donuts eaten each year, which is a nice little Canada stat.
This is why people listen to this podcast, where we get facts about the actual country as well. Really
it's so educational.
Knowledge. Exactly.
History, we do geography, we cover it all on this podcast. But my actual random prediction is that there will be at least 2 overtakes between the McLaren drivers during the race. We're finally going to get the battle that we all want, preferably for the lead. Or if not, I'm fine with that. It means a non-McLaren winner, a bit of variety. But I think it's going to be for the lead, 3 DRS zones, proper scrap, no team orders, just hammer and tong battling.
Just the way we like it, isn't it? Cool. Let me just go through my DNF and random prediction, then we can close out the show. I have gone, surprisingly, I have decided not to go for a rookie. So everyone who supports rookies in 2025.
And what have you done with Anwar, the host of the F1 podcast?
Yeah, he's gone. This is a impersonation of Anwar, isn't it? But no, I think Pierre Gasly is going to be our DNF. I think Alpine, as of late, have had a rotten time, and I think this is going to continue. So I've gone for Pierre Gasly over Colapinto. I think one of the two Alpines will go. And I think that's more likely to be a mechanical than a crash, but we'll see how that plays out. In terms of my random predictions, I've gone for a track limit related random prediction because I'm saying 3 black and white flags for track limits. Now, I think that it's very possible for people to go over the limits in terms of tracks because there's a lot of runoff area across the track. So I think there's this distinct possibility you can skip the chicane or not take it in the correct way as well. So I think there's opportunity to do this type of thing, which is why I predict that way. Cool. Is that random enough for everyone?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought
fine
of
with
that
that.
actually.
Yeah, that's pretty.
There's a lot of grass, but there is some runoff as well. And I guess especially in that
I
final
think if
chicane.
the McLarens are going to fight, one of them is cutting the chicane at the final chicane.
I mean, they've already done it.
That's definitely a possibility, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, in Miami, Oscar Piastri skipped over the chicane towards the end of the lap. That was probably because of debris, but yeah, it's very possible.
Cool. So that brings us to the end of the 22nd episode of the 2025 season for the Warwick F1 show. I want to thank all my guests, so Thomas, Daniel, and Lucy, for all coming on for this preview. We will be back at some point next week to deconstruct the events that happened over the course of the Canadian Grand Prix weekend. So we'll see you then. Thank you guys very much for listening and watching, and goodbye.